I didn't wear my uniform that day, not because I wasn't proud of it. God knows I earned every ribbon, every star stitched across that shoulder, but because I knew the moment I stepped into that Air Force base dressed like the soldier I really was, my family's illusion would collapse. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for what would come after. You see, my little sister, Emily, was being promoted to major that morning. The whole Walker family was glowing with pride, ready to celebrate the one who made it. And I was just Jessica, the older sister, who tried the military for a while but didn't last, at least. That's the story they tell. But that wasn't the truth, not even close. Because as I sat there in that stiff row of folding chairs, watching the flag rise, clapping when I was supposed to, smiling when it hurt, I was already a general in the United States Army. Let that sink in. My father, a retired colonel with 3 tours behind him. My brother, a major in the Marines. My grandfather, a Navy legend. And me, the first and only female general in the Walker bloodline. Yet completely erased from the family legacy. Why? Because I was born with the wrong chromosomes. Because the Walkers had a code, unwritten but enforced like doctrine. Walker men fight, Walker women support. No exceptions, no discussions, no deviations. And when I say they enforced it, I don't mean through discipline or disapproval, I mean through silence, through years of psychological surgery that cut you open, took the parts of you they didn't want, and stitched you back together with shame. I remember being 10 years old, sneaking into my father's study when he was out on base. While other girls were braiding dolls, I was reading about guerrilla warfare and Napoleonic flanks. I traced battle maps like other kids traced Disney princesses. Strategy was my playground. One afternoon, I stayed in there too long. Dad walked in. He stood at the door and laughed. Not playfully, dismissively. "That's cute, Jess," he said. "But those are serious books, for serious men. Why don't you help your mother in the kitchen?" That moment didn't crush me, not yet. It planted something darker, a seed of doubt, wrapped in the voice of the man I most wanted to impress. I applied to West Point in secret. I didn't tell anyone until the acceptance letter arrived. At dinner that night, I announced it like it was a miracle because to me, it was. I thought, maybe now he'll see me. He didn't. He set down his fork, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "West Point, Jessica, you won't last a week in basic. The military isn't for women like you. It'll chew you up and spit you out." My mother reached across the table and touched my hand. Not to comfort me, to redirect me. "Sweetheart, you're too smart for this. You could go anywhere. Why throw your life away on that? Marriage, children, stability, that's what makes a woman happy." My brother, home on leave, howled with laughter. "Jess, you cried watching Saving Private Ryan. You're gonna lead troops. That's adorable." Little Emily sat quiet, eyes bouncing from face to face like a spectator at a trial where I was both defendant and guilty verdict. I said nothing for a long moment. Then I whispered, "I'm going," and I meant it. Every syllable of that sentence came from the deepest part of me, the part they never believed in. My father shook his head, smiling like I was a foolish girl who'd just declared she was moving to the moon. "You'll be back in a month," he said, "and then we'll have to listen to you explain why you failed for the rest of your life." There was no cake that night, no champagne. No family photo beside the fireplace, just me, sitting on my bed, holding a letter that said I was good enough, while surrounded by people who refused to believe it. That was the beginning of a pattern that would define the next 15 years. At West Point, I nearly broke. Everything they warned me about was real: the shouting, the sleep deprivation, the humiliation. I wrote home during those first weeks. Not because I missed them, but because I wanted them to know. I was still standing. They'd barely responded. The few letters I got were filled with hometown gossip and subtle hints that I should come back before it was too late. Still, I stayed. Still, I rose. Still, I fought, and they never knew. They didn't ask. And eventually, I stopped offering. I learned how to climb in silence. I learned how to lead without applause. I learned how to carry my family's legacy alone. And as I sat at Emily's promotion that day, wearing a civilian dress, Watching my father beam at her like she was the fulfillment of everything he'd ever dreamed for a daughter, I realized something chilling. They weren't just proud of her. They were proud she wasn't me, and that was when it hit me. This wasn't ignorance, this was erasure. They didn't fail to see my worth. They chose not to see it, and that choice had changed everything. If this story has moved something in you even just a little, consider subscribing to this channel. Every new follower gives us the motivation to keep telling the stories that go unspoken. Stories like Jessica's, stories like yours. Now, I want to hear from you. Question for you. Imagine you were in Jessica's shoes facing years of dismissal from your own family, would you? I keep sharing your progress, hoping one day they'll finally recognize it. B. Stop sharing, protect your peace, and focus on your own growth silently. Comment or be below. There's no right answer, just your truth. And stay tuned, because what happens next in Jessica's journey will challenge everything you think you know about family, identity, and the quiet power of a woman who refuses to break. The first week at West Point nearly broke her. Jessica had always been strong in the quiet way, the kind of strength that doesn't announce itself, but you feel it when she walks into a room. But West Point didn't care about quiet strength. It screamed, it pushed, it punished, it tested everything she believed about herself. The confidence she had carried like armor turned fragile under the weight of endless drills, shouted orders, aching muscles, and nights that seemed to never end. She wasn't prepared, not really, no one ever is. Her father's voice echoed in her head more loudly than any drill sergeant. You won't last a week. He wasn't just wrong, he was haunting. That first night, lying on a stiff cot in the pitch-black barracks, she curled into herself. Every muscle screamed. Her knuckles were raw from push-ups on concrete. Her lungs still burned from the morning run. The beds around her were filled with other cadets who had grown up hearing that they were made for this. But Jessica, she had arrived believing she would have to prove she belonged. And that belief cut deeper than any wound. She wrote letters, not many. Just enough to feel like she was reaching out. They weren't desperate cries for comfort. They were evidence, I'm still here. I passed the first PT test. I led my unit during drill today. Small triumphs, shared with people who would never read them the way she meant them. When the replies came, they were casual, brief. Her mother's handwriting danced around anything meaningful. Updates on the dog, a neighbor's divorce, church gossip. And then, buried between the lines, suggestions. You know, community college is still an option if it gets too hard. Don't forget, you're always welcome at home. Your cousin Madison just got engaged. Such exciting news. Imagine, she'd be a mother soon. There were no words from her father, not a single sentence. Silence, she would learn, has more weight than judgment. But the breaking point didn't come from the pain or the pressure, it came from isolation. From the terrifying realization that there was no applause waiting at the end of the day. That the people who should have been her foundation, her family, had chosen to stand outside the arena and watch from a distance, arms folded, already convinced she'd lose. She thought about quitting more than once. There were nights she sat alone in the chapel, staring at the stained glass until her eyes burned. She prayed, not for strength, but for a reason to keep pushing. A reason not to walk away from a path that seemed determined to spit her out. Then, when she needed it most, she found something unexpected, someone who saw her. Diana Lewis was everything Jessica wasn't sure she could be: confident, sharp-tongued, fearless. She had grown up in a military family that believed in her. And yet, she never once made Jessica feel small. You're going to make one hell of an officer, Bennett, Diana said one night as they polished their boots side by side. Jessica looked up, startled. Why would you say that? Because I see how you work. You don't just follow orders, you understand them. You lead with your mind before your mouth. That's rare. I'd follow you into battle any day. That was the first time Jessica believed she might actually belong. But belief doesn't shield you from reality. In their second year, during a cold weather training exercise in the mountains, Jessica took a fall that shattered her leg. The break was bad, clean through the tibia. The pain was sharp and unforgiving. It wasn't just the bone that cracked. It was the momentum she had spent 2 years building. The surgery went well, the recovery did not. Weeks in the medical ward left her watching classmates push forward while she lay still. The word discharge started circulating. Not from her doctors, but whispered among cadets, floated casually by a nurse. There's no shame in recognizing your limits, someone said, but that phrase didn't land gently. It sounded too much like her father, like prophecy. She considered giving up, just once. Then one afternoon, a knock on the door interrupted her spiral. A woman in a crisp uniform stepped into the room, holding a folder. Cadet Bennett, her voice was sharp, precise. Authority wrapped in velvet. Yes, ma'am. I'm Captain Rebecca Collins. I've been monitoring your progress. Before your injury, you were tracking in the top 5% of your class. Jessica lowered her eyes. That doesn't matter now. It matters entirely, Captain Collins replied, because it tells me exactly what you're capable of. This injury, it's just data, a new variable. And you strike me as someone who solves problems, not surrenders to them. She didn't leave after that, not really. She came back again and again bringing tactical exercises, leadership scenarios, and challenges that pushed Jessica mentally when her body couldn't move. When Jessica was cleared for physical therapy, Collins arranged double sessions. When doubt crept back in, Collins stared it down. The army doesn't need another soldier who's never failed, she said one evening, watching Jessica struggle through a strength test. It needs leaders who know exactly what it takes to keep going when everything tells them to stop. That changed everything. Recovery was slow, but Jessica clawed her way back. Inch by inch, she returned to her unit. She earned her place again not because anyone handed it to her, but because she refused to let go of it. She graduated not just in the top 5%, but with honors. With distinction, with resilience forged in silence. Her family attended the ceremony. Of course they did. It was tradition. It would have looked bad not to. They clapped at the right moments, smiled in photographs. Her father even shook her hand like a stranger would, formal, detached. Well, he said, you proved me wrong about basic. But let's see how you handle real military life. That's where most fall apart. Jessica said nothing. She had learned by then that you don't always need to respond. Sometimes, the most powerful answer is to live so fully in your truth that their doubt shrivels in its shadow. She didn't write any more letters after that. She no longer needed to prove she was still standing. Now, she was moving forward, with or without them. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes not from being alone, but from being unseen. That was the loneliness Jessica carried with her, not in war zones or briefing rooms, but at her own family's dinner table. From the outside, everything looked picture perfect. Jessica had built a military career that most would never even dream of. She had ascended ranks that few women reached, earned commendations that couldn't be spoken of outside classified circles, and operated in rooms where lives were weighed, decisions calculated, and nations quietly steered away from catastrophe. But inside her family's living room, she was just Jessica, the one who had tried, the one who had failed. The one who filed government paperwork now and didn't like to talk about it because, according to her mother, it gave her anxiety. It started small, this erasure, a silence here, a shrug there. When Jessica was promoted to captain, she called home, proud and hopeful. Her mother's voice on the other end of the line was sweet, but distracted, like she'd been caught mid-dusting. That's nice, dear, but are you thinking about settling down soon? You're not getting any younger. Her father was worse. Captain is just the start, he said, unimpressed. Let's see if you make it to Major before you celebrate. Most don't. When she made Major, she didn't call. What was the point? It wasn't long after that her sister Emily announced that she was joining the Air Force the right way. She made sure to emphasize through officer training school, not the military academy. The entire family erupted with pride. Her father's voice practically shook the house when he told relatives over the phone, now that's a Walker. Emily knows how to do things properly. She'd go far, mark my words. At Christmas that year, Jessica brought Ryan, her fiancé at the time, an intelligence officer himself. She had imagined, maybe naively, that introducing him might open up a more adult connection with her family. But her father didn't ask Ryan about his work. He asked whether Jessica was still playing soldier, and then laughed when Jessica tried to share a recent leadership milestone. She's got her little desk job, he told an uncle, waving his hand dismissively, keeps her busy with paperwork. That night, after her father pulled her aside to lecture her once more about the futility of chasing a military career, Jessica didn't argue. She looked him in the eye and said, "You're right, my path is different. And from now on, I won't bore you with the details." He smiled, mistaking that sentence for surrender. But it wasn't surrender, it was a boundary. From that point forward, Jessica stopped giving them any updates. No promotions, no deployments, no operations. She gave vague, generic answers when asked. Same old stuff, mostly admin, nothing exciting. What they didn't know couldn't be dismissed. What they didn't see couldn't be misjudged. Behind that shield of silence, she thrived. She moved through ranks faster than her peers, led complex international missions, solved logistical nightmares that saved lives, intercepted threats before they became headlines. Her work became the spine of critical operations, yet all of it was classified. She lived in two realities, the one where generals requested her personally for strategic briefings, and the one where her mother told neighbors she was still trying to find her place. Her silence gave her power, but it also created distance. Even with Ryan, who understood more than most, there were things she couldn't explain. Sometimes, after a particularly intense mission, she would come home, drop her bag by the door, and just stand there frozen, exhausted, empty. Ryan would come over, wrap his arms around her, and whisper, "You don't have to tell me. Just let me hold what you can't say." That's what saved them: his patience. His ability to love the woman who returned from those unseen battles without needing to understand every scar. They married quietly, in a small ceremony on base. Her family came out of obligation, not joy. Her father made a toast at the reception, if you could call it that. He pulled Ryan aside at the bar and said, "Jessica's always been stubborn about the military thing. Good to see she found someone who gets the system better than she does." Ryan didn't say much. But that night, as they packed for their honeymoon, he asked, "Why does your family think you're some kind of failure? Your dad talked to me like I'm babysitting you through a job you can't handle." Jessica sat on the edge of the bed, quiet for a long time. Then she told him everything: the history, the years of dismissal, the subtle war waged at every holiday dinner table. "It's just easier this way," she said. "They've built a story about me. Trying to correct it only creates more distance." "But you're one of the most respected officers in your division," Ryan said. "Your work has literally saved lives. How can they not know who you really are?" She smiled, small and tired, because they've never wanted to. As her clearance level rose, so did her isolation. She was awarded medals she couldn't display, earned promotions she couldn't explain. Her name was whispered in top-level briefings, but back home, it was attached to pity. The narrative shifted again. She was no longer just a disappointment. Now she had emotional issues. That's what her aunt whispered at a reunion, what her mother hinted to church friends. "She doesn't like to talk about her work," her mother said, eyes full of performative concern. "Mary says she struggles with anxiety. Poor thing. We just support her however we can." And all the while, Jessica kept climbing. At 28, she was selected for a position within Special Operations Command, one of the most elite and demanding roles in the military. With a washout rate above 70%, she passed, quietly, alone. She poured a single glass of champagne in her apartment the night she got the letter. No party, no congratulations, no phone calls. No one to tell who would believe her anyway. It was during that role she met the officers who would later recommend her for an accelerated promotion tracker path that led directly to becoming one of the youngest female generals in her branch's history. All while her family believed she was processing paperwork somewhere behind a desk. They didn't question why she never showed her awards. They never asked why she never mentioned her deployments. They didn't bother to Google her name. Because to question their version of her would mean accepting that they had been wrong, not just a little, monumentally. And sometimes, people will believe a lie about you longer than they're willing to face the discomfort of truth. Jessica didn't hide because she was ashamed, she hid because she was exhausted. because no medal could erase the wounds caused by being disbelieved year after year by the people who were supposed to believe in you the most. She didn't need their recognition to survive, but deep down, she still longed for it. And whether she admitted it or not, that longing was about to be tested in a way no mission, no deployment, no training exercise had ever prepared her for. The invitation sat on the kitchen counter for 3 days before Jessica touched it. A simple envelope with her sister's name printed neatly across the front. Inside, it read, "You are cordially invited to the promotion ceremony of Major Emily Walker, United States Air Force." A moment of celebration for the family, one more chance for her father to beam with pride. Another Walker reaching a milestone the whole bloodline could rally around. Jessica stood in the kitchen, arms folded, staring at that envelope like it was ticking. Ryan noticed the way she stared at it. He didn't say anything right away, just waited. "She's my sister," Jessica said eventually, her voice low, despite everything. "That still means something," Ryan nodded. "If you do go, will you wear the uniform?" Jessica didn't answer right away. The question sliced through layers of carefully constructed boundaries. She knew what it would mean. Stepping into that room with her stars on full display would erase all ambiguity. There would be no more pretending, no more hiding behind vague job descriptions. The truth, in full dress blues, would be undeniable. She shook her head slowly. "This is Emily's day, not mine. I'll wear civilian clothes. I won't be the story." Ryan didn't push, but his silence said more than words. He would have preferred she wore it. He wanted the truth to stand unshakable, unmissable, but he understood the cost. The morning of the ceremony, Jessica dressed carefully. A tailored navy dress, hair pulled back, simple earrings. She looked composed, unremarkable, appropriate. She looked like someone you might not notice if you didn't know better. She arrived early, hoping to slip in quietly, take a seat near the back. But her mother spotted her before she even reached the building. "Jessica, over here," her voice rang out, too loud for comfort. Her father stood beside her, posture upright, still wearing the invisible weight of his own rank, long retired. Her brother was there, too, laughing with an old military friend. "You made it," her father said, not warmly. More like he was surprised she'd bothered. "Good to see you making an effort for your sister's big day." Jessica smiled politely. "I wouldn't miss it." Her mother linked arms with her as they walked. It wasn't affection, it was possession. "You look nice, dear, a little thin, maybe. And your hair, it was always so pretty when you wore it down." They hadn't seen each other in over a year, but the conversation resumed as if no time had passed and as if Jessica's life hadn't quietly eclipsed all their expectations. A group of Air Force officers approached them outside the hall. Her father straightened, slipping back into his old role like a glove. One officer addressed him directly. "Colonel Walker, it's an honor. Your daughter Emily speaks so highly of your service." "The honor's mine," he replied, shaking hands with pride. "The Walker military tradition continues strong with Emily." He placed a hand on Jessica's shoulder and turned slightly. "And this is our other daughter, Jessica." She tried the military route for a while too, but it wasn't a good fit. Jessica bit the inside of her cheek and smiled again. The officer's interest dimmed immediately, and her mother chimed in with a whisper that carried, "She works in government now. We don't ask too many questions, it gives her anxiety." No one laughed, but no one challenged it either. Inside the ceremony hall, the air smelled of polished floors and formality. Her family took their seats near the front. Jessica sat just beside them, hands folded in her lap, her mind already rehearsing an excuse to slip out early if it became too much. More introductions followed, more polite dismissals disguised as small talk. Her brother added his usual commentary, "Remember when Jess cried during that war movie? Should have known then," and the laughter from the people around them landed like little bruises. Emily remained silent throughout it all. When their eyes met across the room, Jessica saw something like apology, but it never turned into action. She said nothing to correct anyone. No gentle interjection, no glance of defense. Jessica's jaw ached from holding her expression. The ceremony began with full military precision, speeches, flags, recognition of family. Jessica stood when expected, clapped when required, and sat with the posture of someone raised by the man, now nodding with pride beside her but whose respect had always been reserved for someone else. Then the name was called. Colonel James Harrison will now preside over today's promotions. Jessica froze. She knew that name. Not from some distant article, not from a friend of a friend, but from classified briefings, late-night strategy calls, and a mission that had changed the course of an operation known only to a dozen people in the country. She had led that mission. Harrison had reported to her. As he took the podium, Jessica shifted slightly in her chair, angling her face away, lowering her eyes. Civilian dress, quiet expression. Maybe she'd blend in. Maybe he wouldn't notice. He began speaking. The usual acknowledgements: family, service, sacrifice. His eyes scanned the crowd, polite and professional. And then, mid-sentence, he stopped, just for a beat, his eyes locked on hers. Recognition flashed in his expression, surprise, and then something close to respect. He recovered smoothly, continued the speech, but Jessica knew. She could feel the shift in energy ripple through the space. When the formal portion ended and Emily stood proudly in her new rank, Jessica moved to step away quietly, but she didn't get far. "Ma'am," a voice called behind her, respectful but direct. She turned. Colonel Harrison stood before her. No hesitation, no doubt. "General Walker," he said clearly, loud enough for those around to hear. "It's an honor to see you again. Your work on Operation Northern Compass was nothing short of brilliant. We're still implementing your strategic framework." The silence in that corner of the room was instant. Jessica nodded. "Thank you, Colonel. But today isn't about that. It's Major Walker's day. I'm here as family." Harrison raised an eyebrow. "Your sister?" "Yes," he smiled. "Remarkable, to Walker's serving with distinction." "Your family must be incredibly proud." Before Jessica could respond, her father stepped forward, face pale. "There must be some mistake," he said quickly. "Jessica works in an administrative role. She's not." "No mistake, sir," Harrison replied. "General Walker is one of our most decorated strategic minds. Much of her work is classified, but within military leadership, her name is legendary." Other officers nearby began to tune in. A young major stepped forward, eyes wide. "You're General Walker, the one who developed the Integrated Response Protocol." "We just trained on it last month." Jessica nodded slightly. Her mother's hand was now at her mouth. Her brother stared in disbelief. Emily looked like someone had slapped her. Harrison, sensing the tension, gave a respectful nod. "Apologies for the interruption, General. Perhaps we can speak next week about expanding the training program." "Of course," Jessica replied, her voice steady. As he walked away, her family stood frozen in place, reality crashing down on the narrative they had built so carefully, protected so tightly. The truth had stepped into the light, and it was wearing her name. The silence that filled the room after Colonel Harrison walked away was not the same silence Jessica had grown used to all her life. It wasn't dismissive, it wasn't empty. It was stunned, humbling, shattering. Her father stood still, his military posture intact, but the pride that once puffed his chest had drained into a confusion he couldn't cover. Her mother clutched her purse as if grounding herself in something familiar. Marcus kept shaking his head like he couldn't compute the idea. And Emily, newly promoted, newly celebrated, stared at her sister with a face twisted by something more complicated than jealousy or shame. It was betrayal, maybe, or the slow realization that she had built her identity in contrast to a fiction. They moved to a private room at her mother's insistence. No one spoke until the door closed behind them. "What exactly is going on?" her father demanded. "Is this a joke?" Jessica met his gaze calmly. "No, I'm a general. Have been for over a year." Her mother stepped forward, her voice softer but no less desperate. "But how? Why didn't you tell us?" Jessica took a breath. She had waited years for this moment, not for vengeance, not for recognition, but for honesty, for the freedom to finally stop pretending. "Because every time I tried to share something meaningful," she said, "you dismissed it, or explained it away, or suggested it must have been handed to me. So I stopped trying." Marcus scoffed. "You outrank all of us. That can't be right." Jessica turned to him. Why? Because you never looked past the story you were more comfortable telling. Her voice didn't rise. She wasn't angry. She was tired. Tired of carrying success like a secret. Tired of performing humility to appease pride. Emily finally spoke. We all did it, she said quietly. Or we let it happen. We just assumed. Jessica turned toward her. Of all the voices in the room, it was Emily's that held the most weight now. Because it wasn't just a sibling dynamic. They had worn the same boots, marched the same halls, felt the same cold steel of command. And yet even Emily had chosen silence when it mattered. I didn't want to be the shadow in your spotlight, Jessica said. So I stayed quiet. I let you have the narrative. I let you all believe I failed because correcting you would have felt like cruelty. Her mother covered her mouth, her eyes brimming. We told everyone you left the military, she whispered. We pitied you. We said you were lost. Jessica gave a half smile. I was never lost, just invisible. Her father paced, trying to wrap his mind around the impossible. You should have told us. No matter what we said, you should have told us. Jessica tilted her head, still composed. And what would you have done with it? When I made captain, you said it didn't count until I made major. When I made major, you asked when I'd stop chasing a career and start a family. You never saw me, Dad. You saw a version of me that fit your expectations. And that version had no room to grow. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Ryan entered the room quietly, having arrived late. His eyes scanned the tension. His hand gently touched the small of her back. Did I miss something important? Jessica didn't miss a beat. My family just found out I'm not a military failure after all. Ryan nodded slowly, then turned to her father. With all due respect, sir, General Walker is one of the most respected officers in her field. The rest of us have known who she is for a long time. There was no challenge in his tone, just quiet conviction. A knock interrupted them. A staff aide stepped in and informed Jessica of a developing situation, something minor, but requiring her input. She nodded, excused herself, and stepped into the hallway. But as she paused near the door, she heard Ryan's voice from within. She never wanted to embarrass you, he said. That's why she stayed quiet. But while you were telling people she had anxiety, she was saving lives. While you pitied her, generals were calling her into war rooms. Jessica's breath caught, but she didn't move. Her father's voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. We didn't know. No, Ryan said. You didn't want to. Back inside, when she re-entered the room, her father stood slowly. The way he looked at her this time was different. Not through the lens of disappointment, but through the dawning realization that maybe he had never truly seen his daughter. I think, he said, we need to start this conversation over. A week later, Jessica received a phone call from her father. Not her mother, not Emily, him. He invited her and Ryan to dinner. Just dinner, no holiday, no ceremony, no agenda. They came. The atmosphere was hesitant at first, like walking across ice, unsure of its strength. But when her father set down his fork and looked at her, really looked at her, something shifted. I owe you an apology, he said. Not just for doubting your career, for doubting you. I created a version of you that fit what I understood. And I ignored the version that scared me. Jessica listened in silence. Her mother reached for her hand. We all did, sweetheart, she said. We told a story about you that made sense to us. But we were wrong and we're so sorry. Marcus nodded across the table. I used to think I knew what strength looked like. I didn't, not until now. Emily didn't speak for a long time. When she did, her voice trembled. I built so much of my identity in your shadow, Jess, and I didn't even know it. I'm sorry I didn't defend you. I knew something didn't add up. I should have asked, Jessica nodded. I don't need perfection from any of you, but I need honesty. And I need to know that when I speak, you'll listen. They all agreed. It didn't fix everything. Old habits don't die quietly, but it was the beginning of something new. Months later, Jessica was honored publicly for a strategic initiative that changed the way military branches coordinated in crisis. It was one of the few occasions her work could be spoken of without red tape. She sent invitations to her family, expecting nothing. But as she stood on that stage, in full uniform, The stars on her shoulders gleaming, she spotted them in the crowd. Her father, standing tall, his eyes glistening. Her mother, dabbing at tears, Marcus, Emily, all of them, present. Afterward, her father approached her, saluted out of instinct, then shook her hand. "I was wrong," he said simply. "About what you were capable of, about everything." Jessica nodded. "Thank you, that means something. But you should know I'd have done it anyway." He smiled. "I know, and that's exactly why you did." Later that night, sitting with Ryan in the quiet of their living room, Jessica rested her head on his shoulder. "I used to think I needed their approval," she whispered. "And now?" he asked. She smiled. "Now I just need to keep doing the work, with or without applause." And in that silence, the silence she had once feared, she finally found peace. Sometimes, life hands us the kind of silence that doesn't come from peace, but from being ignored. And over time, we learn how to survive not with loud victories or public praise, but with quiet, unshakable strength. Jessica Walker's story reminds us of a truth many carry but rarely speak, that the most powerful wins often happen when no one is watching. There's something profoundly painful about being doubted by the people who are supposed to believe in you the most. When you're told over and over again that you're not enough or worse, that you're pursuing the wrong dreams, it plants seeds of self-doubt that can take years to unroot. And yet, Jessica didn't let those doubts define her. She didn't fight back with words or rebellion. She fought back with excellence. She chose to walk the hard road alone. To keep showing up, to keep growing, to keep becoming the kind of leader, the kind of woman, the kind of person she always knew she could be even if no one else saw it. And when the truth finally surfaced, when the people who had written her off had to face the reality of her strength, it wasn't anger or vengeance that stood before them, it was grace, composure, self-respect. That's the difference between someone who seeks validation and someone who has already validated themselves. Her story is not just about the military, it's about families, about dreams, about women who are constantly told they're too much for some things and not enough for others. It's about anyone who's ever had to hide their light just to survive the expectations of others. And it's about reclaiming that light not through confrontation, but through consistent, quiet courage. Maybe that's what makes Jessica's journey so powerful. She didn't just prove them wrong, she proved herself right. And in doing so, she gave every single person watching permission to believe that they, too, can rise above the narratives that limit them. So what's the lesson here? The deepest strength doesn't always come from applause. It comes from doing the work when no one sees. From keeping your integrity when no one thanks you. From choosing to become exactly who you were meant to be even when the world insists on defining you otherwise. And in today's world where so many people are addicted to validation, likes, and attention, this story teaches us the rarest kind of discipline, to stay the course even when no one is clapping. So how can you apply this to your life? Maybe you're in a job where your efforts go unnoticed. Maybe your family never truly saw your dreams as valid. Maybe you've been working hard on something, your health, your goals, your mindset, and no one acknowledges the progress. That's okay. You don't need them to. You only need to believe in yourself long enough to reach the other side. And when you do, when the moment comes where truth rises to the surface, you won't need to shout. You won't need to say, "I told you so." You'll just stand there, quietly powerful, and let your life speak for itself. Question for you. Have you ever done something you're proud of even though no one noticed, believed in you, or supported you at the time? Please share your answer in the comments. Yes, I kept going quietly, and I'm proud of what I achieved. B, not yet, but I want to start building that quiet strength in myself. Let us know your answer below. Your story might inspire someone else who's going through the same thing. And if this video moved you even just a little, please consider subscribing to the channel and donating if you're able to. I'm not young anymore, but I still believe in doing something meaningful with my time. Creating content like this, telling stories that matter, takes effort and energy. If you'd like to help support this mission, whether it's $1, $5, or simply your time, it truly means the world. Your donation helps keep this channel alive so we can continue bringing wisdom, perspective, and truth to more people. Thank you for watching, and remember, you don't need anyone's permission to be great. Just the courage to keep going, especially when no one's watching.